Let's take a closer look at the new 2026 F1 regulations. While the 2022 regulations were changing the chassis in order to allow cars to follow each other more easily while keeping the drivetrain the same, the 2026 regulations mainly focus on changing the drivetrain while adjusting the chassis regulations accordingly. So let's work through this. First of all, the FIA was sitting together with 6 engine manufacturers: Mercedes, Ferrari, Renault, Honda, Ford and Audi. Somehow the FIA forgot to mention Honda in their official video, but they were talking about 6 manufacturers and Honda stays in F1, so that should be right. Problem of the current drivetrain regulations is that they are too complex and expensive. So it's hard for new manufacturers to join. So they decided to kick the MGU-H out of the cars, the electric motor which sits on the turbocharger shaft and hence sees high RPMs and a lot of heat. Unfortunate is just that manufacturers like Mercedes and Porsche now start putting MGU-Hs in their road cars, so soon road cars will have more complex hybrid systems than F1 cars. At the same time, they reduce compression and boost of the combustion engine, so it only delivers around 400 kW instead of 540. Manufacturers also wanted to concentrate on the electric powertrain, and so the ERS system grew from 120 kW to 350 kW. Problem is just that they only do this with an MGU-K, so an electric motor which is connected to the crankshaft. That means the electric energy can only be recovered from the rear axle. And currently, with only 120 kW, they're pretty close to the limit. If you want to generate more electric power under braking, you are locking the rear wheels. So, as we discussed in my earlier videos, the solution would be to install an electric front motor at the front axle. But manufacturers were scared that Audi would have an advantage because of their LMP1 experience 10 years ago. And so they decided against it. So how can they now generate enough electric energy to be able to deploy 350 kW every lap? They decided to burn more fuel to recharge the batteries. But manufacturers wanted a sustainable drivetrain. So they decided to use e-fuels now, so emissions are not an issue anymore. But still, you would have to burn quite a lot of fuel to constantly recharge the battery during a race. And cars could be very slow if they are using up their energy too quickly during a lap. So in order to somehow fix these issues, they decided to massively reduce drag. First of all, they reduce frontal area. The cars will be 100 mm narrower and will have narrower tires. More on this in my other video. To slow the cars down a bit, they decided for less downforce. That also means less drag. So the floor is a lot flatter and not as curved and high as today. The diffuser is lower and there's no beam wing anymore. At the same time, the rear wing will have 3 elements and produce a bigger percentage of downforce. And here, they decided to use active aerodynamics in order to massively reduce the car's energy consumption. So the top 2 elements of the rear wing will move on the straight. And because drivers complained about the unsafe aero balance change, the front wing will do the same. So front and rear wing will have 3 elements and the top 2 can be backed off on the straights. So by loading the wings more, they also lose more drag when they are flat on the straights. But the key here is that this is not working as an overtaking aid anymore. The wings will be flat for every car on every straight. You no longer have to be in the 1-second gap to the car in front of you for the wings to be flat. So if both cars will be faster on the straight, how do you help overtaking? By allowing more electric power for the car behind. So there's no aerodynamic help for overtaking anymore, it's an electric help. Originally, the FIA wanted to reduce fuel tank size significantly, but now they stick with 100 kg fuel load, so cars won't be embarrassingly slow because they have to save fuel. Because everyone is asking for smaller and lighter cars, the FIA reduced wheelbase by 200 mm to now 3400 mm. That makes sense because F1 cars are unnecessarily long right now. The V6 engine is pretty short and also the gearbox is short. So current F1 cars have a very long bell housing with all kinds of components packaged inside, and it makes sense to shorten it. And then there is the side of the new regulations where they try to fix what they missed or teams worked around since 2022. They only allowed very simple front wings, which are backed off at the sides, but teams could still manage to create outwash. So now they reduce the width of the front wing significantly. So teams cannot create outwash outside of the front wheels anymore. Then they bent the bargeboard area so teams cannot push the front wheel wake outside anymore. Instead, teams used the floor strakes for that and created large side pods which push the dirty air outboard. So for 2026, they introduce a large inwashing vane to keep the dirty front wheel wake closer to the car's center. And they tried to avoid upper end plates with the 2022 regulations to reduce efficiency, but Aston Martin found a way around it, and now teams are working with floating flap tips. So the end plates in 2026 will become spec parts, so they will be the same for everyone, which means we will get back normal end plates, and they are super long and straight at the bottom to avoid increasing expansion for the diffuser. So all in all, the 2026 regulations are a huge compromise. In the end, they kept the current engine, but it's heavily detuned. F1 is kicking out the MGU-H, but now road cars are using the technology. Because they didn't want front electric motors, they have to burn more fuel to charge the battery, and to make this work, they didn't really reduce the fuel tank size and use active aero to massively reduce drag on the straights. On the plus side, we can say that they increased safety, the minimum weight is reduced by 30 kg, and the cars are a bit smaller. So, what do you think? Is this the right way for the future, or will we need new regulations pretty soon again? Let me know in the comments below and see you at the next video.